Good afternoon, ATB Business. It's been a while since we've all connected. Welcome to our first quarterly business live stream. I've popped a link in the chat already in case you missed it. Chris had shared that we are making some intentional updates to our business live stream cadence. You can find some more information in the article posted in the chat there. Also, happy Diwali to our team members who are celebrating. More than 1 billion people celebrate Diwali worldwide, making it one of the largest and most significant celebrations around the world, if you didn't know. Our South Asian Team Member Network is also hosting our first annual Diwali party, celebrating the Festival of Lights in Edmonton on the 29th. So you can also find more information and get your ticket if you're interested. I will also post a link in our Q&A there so you can check out more information and check out our South Asian Team Member Network there to see some of the great things that they are up to. So we have a 1-hour live stream here with you today. So I will kick us off first with our land acknowledgement, and then we will get right into it. So today we acknowledge that what we call Alberta is the traditional and ancestral territory of many peoples, presently subject to treaties 6, 7, and 8, namely the Blackfoot Confederacy, Kainai, Piikani, and Siksika, the Cree, Dene, Saulteaux, Nakota Sioux, Stoney Nakoda, and Tsuut'ina Nation. The Métis people of Alberta, this includes the Métis settlements and the 6 regions of the Métis Nation of Alberta within the historical Northwest Métis homeland. We acknowledge the many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit who have lived in and cared for these lands for generations. We are grateful for the traditional knowledge keepers, the elders who are still with us today, and those who've gone before us. We make this acknowledgement as an act of reconciliation and gratitude to those whose territory we are residing on or visiting. So I know that since we have last connected, we have recently had the National Day of Truth and Reconciliation. Part of that for me and my journey towards learning more about the land that I'm residing on is taking and exploring the resources that are available to me. I know we have our refreshed agreed pathway here at ATB, and I would encourage everybody to also do the same and explore some of the resources that are available here at ATB and outside. So again, we have a jam-packed agenda here. I'll pass it over to Chris to get us started. Chris, you're on mute.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Melissa, for the introduction. Thanks for kicking things off. And as usual, we're going to kick it off with a client story. And we got a special guest who needs no introduction for the client story. So I know he's a little bit down as the Rough Riders are officially eliminated from the playoffs, but I know this story cheers him up. So I'll pass it over to Darren.
Thanks, Chris. Yeah, you had to bring up the Riders. It is a bit of a sore spot, but it is what it is. Well, next year country now. So yeah, no, Chris is right. This story is it's a terrific story, to be honest. It's how our dual coverage, multi-coverage model comes to play every day. And, the customer that we're going to talk about, I'm not going to name names because, it's just for confidentiality reasons. But I mean, it hit advisory, it hit financial markets, it hit credit, it hit corporate banking. It hit all of the sweet spots that we're trying to really develop out and be impactful for our clients. This story is about a customer that we actually signed a co-advisory mandate to actually purchase a large acquisition out of Saskatchewan of 40,000 barrels producer. So this is an E&P story. I guess I should have said that. The client, we advise the client on competitive bids, the maximum bid price, what accretive, how so it'd be accretive, the capital structure, the ability to finance the all cash offering. So this was a sizable deal. It was $2.3 billion. So it's a big number. And we were very instrumental in putting that together. And that was our investment banker, corporate banking group. We underwrote $317 million of this transaction, which is a big number for ATB as well. A number like that has to go all the way to the board, has to be, go through a number of layers and gates to make sure that, it's something that ATB wants to do. The other piece about it, though, is that, our financial markets are going to generate a significant amount of revenue from it as well, because there's mandatory hedging in place. So this one is one of those stories that I'm just proud of, because it really shows why we put the two teams together, or the teams together from Multicorp, and made the capital market space. So with that, Chris, I'll turn it over. But I mean, this was an exciting story. We got a couple good ones that are going on right now that I'm willing to come back and talk about in the next quarterly one, because they're going to be terrific stories as well. But these are the wins that I really am proud of the team, and there were so many people involved. I can't even single out one or two people. It was really a village to make sure that we won this transaction, and yeah, I was very proud of the team for what they did.
Thanks, Darren. A couple of things really stand out for me. One, you reiterated a couple of times just the dual coverage model and how important that is to win transactions and to win business like this. You also talked about the financial markets side, and just how every team member involved throughout these conversations, it was a moment for us to show that we're different, to show how the advice that we provide is critical. And I think when you have team members showing up in such a great way, that's what allows us to get more and more business. So great story from that standpoint. Thanks a lot for sharing. Would love for you to come on and share future great stories like that. As a long-time goaltender, I'm always nervous of when someone says the word shutout, so I won't jinx the closing of any of these deals before they happen, but would love for you to come on and share some of those stories. And a huge thank you to the team members that made that story happen. As Darren said, lots of firsts for us at ATB. So a great story from that standpoint. As Melissa said, it's the first time we've got a chance to get together in a long time. So it's great to connect with everyone. One of the first we've had, I think, for myself, is it's just been such an amazing fall in terms of the weather. I can't remember, as a born and raised Albertan, when we've had such an amazing fall. It was interesting. I was actually talking to my girls and said, usually this time of year, like when I grew up, we were walking uphill to school both ways. There was 5 feet of snow, and it was crazy. Well, I wasn't sure they heard a word I said as they were on their phones when I was talking to them. But, it's just absolutely amazing the weather we've had. I think there's something about being an Albertan, because as soon as we talk about how great the weather has been, we always finish that off with, we're going to be punished at some point along the road. We're going to pay in the depths of winter from there. So we'll see how it is. Fingers are crossed that we have a great winter as well. A couple of things. I'll provide a couple of quick updates, and then you see Carrie's joining us. Carrie will talk to us about our financial results, and then at the very end of the call, I will talk about some restructuring that we're doing across ATB business to make sure that we're well positioned to deliver on the 10-year strategy. So as Melissa said, we've changed the live stream cadence. We're no longer doing monthly live streams. We've moved that to a quarterly basis, and a quarterly basis will actually go with a fairly regular agenda in terms of, we'll talk about the big key strategic pieces of work, any key updates from the enterprise. From that standpoint, we'll make sure we get some time to talk about financials all across ATB business. And of course, we'll leave lots of time for questions. In between the quarterly live streams, I'll just do a very quick 10-minute vlog from that standpoint, just to highlight some things that are going on. But if you want, feel free to invite myself, any members of the senior leadership team out to attend any of the meetings. It was great at Brian Ford's meeting. A number of senior leaders from Darren's team were attending. Myron attended, and I'll make that offer without the SPLT knowing that they will go out and attend any meetings that people may have. So why the change? Well, first off, we were getting less than 40% of team members attending a monthly live stream. And we were talking about really important information, and only 40% of team members were we connecting with via the live stream, which isn't good enough from that standpoint. We need to be touching base with more team members. So needed to look for a different way to do that. 2, we have an incredibly diverse team across ATB business, from capital markets to risk to business solutions to adaptation. And to try and find the right level of messaging is extremely difficult from that standpoint. So we wanted to make sure that we're able to elevate these calls to a high enough level that it appeals and sort of, is important to all team members across ATB Business. 3, it was important that there's connectivity. And what I mean by connectivity is what messages are being delivered at what level. And to make sure right from Curtis's Friday and 30s all the way down that we made connections. We understand as team members, time is probably the most precious resource that you have. And we want to make sure that when you're attending meetings that they're worthwhile and that you're getting value. Finally, and this is a personal belief of mine, that I think it's critically important that messages come from local leaders. Local leaders understand what's going on the teams the best. Darren and myself and Myron and Brian and John and everyone else, we don't know what's happening on a day-to-day basis, but local leaders are in the best position to deliver that. So we will make sure we're supporting local leaders. We'll be having a leadership call on a monthly basis. So leaders, you don't get away with not getting to talk to us at the SBLT, just to make sure that everyone's on the same page and the right message is getting out to the right team members at the right time. So thank you very much as we've switched the cadence, and hopefully everyone is able to get used to that. Second, and you may have seen, I've got a new name tag on, and we released our new brand, Powering Possibility, internally in June. And it was very exciting over the last week. You've been able to see the release of our brand, Powering Possibility, out there in the public, whether through radio ads, on TV, billboards. It was a full page ad in the Edmonton Journal, really starting for us to, on an outward basis, bring to life the architect of the Sage, this expertise to allow us to really bring every one of our clients' unique possible to life. So really excited, great feedback. I know it's tested extremely well out in the market in the initial times. And for us in ATB Business, it is absolutely us being the pointy edge of powering possibility. When you look what we do each and every day, we power businesses' possibilities. We power entrepreneurs' dreams. We power large corporate places and large corporate companies in terms of where they're going. So really excited from that standpoint. I think Melissa right now is posting a reminder on the chat in terms of what we have to do to bring it to life, which is order new name tags, new business cards. There's also some other administration things that you can do. If you see an old sign, there's a place where you can crumple it up and throw it away, and we can get new material ordered from that standpoint. So if you haven't seen it on ATB Connect, please go to ATB Connect and look at it from that standpoint. Lastly, if you're on ATB Connect, you may have seen that Chi results are in. So there was an article talking as an enterprise. Our Chi score went up 5 points to 73. Just a brief history from a Chi perspective. We used to be at 78. We actually declined 10 points last year to 68. This year, we're up 5 points to 73. From an ATB Business standpoint, we stayed relatively flat. We finished at 71, which is a drop of 1 point. So pretty consistent from an ATB Business standpoint. What I'm going to do right now is I'm going to do something that will make Melissa, as our head of communications, cringe. And I'm going to bring politics into the discussion, but not politics like you may think of NDP versus UCP, conservative versus liberal, Rachel Notley versus Danielle Smith, none of that. But I'm actually going to compare Chi for a few minutes to elections, maybe not politics itself, but to elections themselves. So first off, I think from an election standpoint, not enough people talk about how many people actually voted. That when you only have 50% of the people voting, the people that choose not to vote that are eligible are actually saying something. They're saying that they don't believe their voice matters, the leaders don't care, that it's already a foregone conclusion, and that there's no path forward. And for me, when I look at Chi, before I look at the raw score, I look at participation rates. Because participation rates, for me, tell me that if there's not strong participation, people don't care enough to tell us how you're feeling. People don't believe that we're going to do something, that your feedback actually falls on deaf ears. Worse than that, it also may say that some people think that just, no matter what happens, no matter what you say, we're not going to do anything. We're not going to take that feedback and create actions. And then finally, some people may look and say, you know what, I think the SBLT, I think leadership is asking for feedback just so they can reinforce for themselves how good of a job they're doing, or they're looking to be told what they want to hear, not what they need to hear. And that's why for me, participation is so critical, because if people aren't participating, if people aren't filling out the survey, doesn't matter. I know there's sometimes people are away and that doesn't happen. We're not looking for 100% participation, but if people aren't doing it, it usually comes down to one of those things. They don't think we care. They don't think your voice matters. And that is absolutely not the truth. So where did our participation sort of finish up from that standpoint? We were just shy of 90%, which is good, but it's not great. We have to be higher. I would love to see 95% participation in terms of people telling us how they're doing. Your voice matters. Ultimately, I would love to get to a place where throughout the year, people feel comfortable that as an SBLT, we've worked hard enough to earn everyone's trust so that you're comfortable to tell us how you're doing. But I also understand there is an importance of anonymous surveys like the CHI survey. So there's two things. One, hopefully everyone knows we take this really, really serious, and it's important that you fill it out. And two, we'll continue to try and earn your trust as an SBLT. So you can just pick up the phone, and whether it's John Anderson, whether it's Brian Ford, Darren, myself, that you're willing to give us a call and just let us know what's going on and how we can do things better. So that's how CHI is similar to an election. So how is it different? Well, in elections, there's a winner, and when someone wins, they believe they've been given a mandate. Not believe, they are given a mandate to govern for the next 4 years. The interesting thing is sometimes when prior to an election, you'll see one party promise a bunch of different things. They're promised that they're going to make your life the easiest in the world, and sometimes those promises come true and sometimes they don't. And this is where elections differ than CHI. As from a CHI standpoint, there's no winning and losing. Over my career, I don't think there's been a CHI score that I've got that I haven't been disappointed. And what I mean by that is there's always room for improvement. There's always room for us to get better. There's no winning. If CHI came in not at 71, but 81, you wouldn't see us as the SBLT sit back and say, thank goodness, we've got a mandate now to lead from that standpoint. CHI provides us feedback on what we're doing well and what we could do different, which is dramatically different than winning or losing from that standpoint. So with the results right now, what we're going to do is, as the SBLT, we're going to take some time, work with our partners in P&C and develop action plans to how do we action the feedback that you've provided? What are the certain things that, over the next 4 quarters that we can start to do to not only address what you've said are areas we need to improve on, but also continue to do the things that we're doing. So look forward to hearing from your leader or your leader's leader in terms of what the CHI results are and what's the action plan. And I want everyone to hold us as leaders accountable, because if it's just feedback for the sake of feedback, we all have better things to do with our time. So the score was 71. The participation rate was just under 90, and look forward to us spending some time really digging into CHI and creating action plans that we'll share with all team members across ATB Business. With that, it's the time everyone's been waiting for. It's financial results. So I know everyone probably has a fairly good understanding of how you're doing in your sort of part of ATB Business, but it's important that everyone understands how all of our roles filter up and impact the larger ATB Business as a whole. And for those of you who haven't had a chance to meet Carrie, Carrie is the CFO for ATB Business and does an amazing job. So with that, I'll turn it over to Carrie.
Just before we jump into our exciting financial results, and I know a lot of you have been messaging me, we are having some trickies with our QA. We've been experiencing that across a few of our live streams. If you have tuned in some other ones, Kira has been pivoting and posting the link over and over again, but it seems that it keeps falling down. So because we are talking about a few really important things today, want to make sure that you can still share your questions. If a few of you already have found this link, but if you navigate within the business news channel to our live stream post, there is a link within that post that allows you to submit your questions in advance. So you can use that format to submit your questions while you are tuned in today, and I will monitor that to make sure that they are received and you have the opportunity to ask them during the format that we are tuned
Yeah,
into.
just to make things also a bit easier, Melissa, if people, they can just send yourself or myself a chat. I was going to say a hangout, a chat directly, and we'll get to your questions that way. We want to make sure there's lots of opportunity for us to answer your questions. So if the link's not working and you can't go to connect, just feel free to send myself or Melissa a chat, and we'd love to get to your questions.
Yes, absolutely. Now over to Carrie.
Well, thank you. Let me pull up my screen here for everybody. Thanks for the nice intro, Chris. I think I've probably met most people here. I've been here way too long. All right, Q2 financial results. Where are we at? We're halfway through the year. Let's take a look from the top of the house. Enterprise level, we're sitting at $4.5 million ahead of plan year to date, income before provisions. So our total revenue is actually $9.9 million unfavorable to our plan, up $33.5 million year over year. Some of the places playing into this is the Bank of Canada prime rate. You all know we've been experiencing more than most have ever experienced in their career in terms of the Bank of Canada prime rate movements taking place this year. At the enterprise level, it is driving positively, primarily actually on the loan side, and we'll get more into that on the business side here as we move on. On the deposit side, I think everybody's aware it doesn't matter which AOE you're in right now, deposit costs are fast-paced rising. There is a little less cash going to be out there in the future. I think all FIs are recognizing that. So it's becoming a bit more competitive out there in terms of pricing. Other income, we're not the only AOE experiencing some challenges on that side. Wealth Markets is seeing some retractions on their side just due to the market and how it's showing up. And of course, I don't need to tell you, Capital Markets, we're seeing some challenges from that side over here. From an expense standpoint, there is some favorability out there. It's not an intentional hold on FTE. I think that there's a little bit higher than normal turnover in the enterprise, also within business. So we've seen a slower pace in terms of hiring FTE than what we would normally be. I think for an AOE, we normally plan for 5%, and we're sitting at 10%. The enterprise is experiencing similar things. On the flip side, there's some other costs that just generally inflationary prices have pushed up faster than what we're expecting. So it's setting a bit of that cost savings from an FTE standpoint. As we move into business results, currently our income before allocations is sitting at $8.5 million ahead of plan, income before provisions. I'll talk a bit about each piece. I'm going to actually get into NII a little bit later on. So you remember that I said at the enterprise level, we have, I'll go back here. All over the place now. The NII for loans, we're the opposite of the enterprise. Our loans is actually under plan, and I'll talk to that. So 12.6 million from that side. On the deposit side, what we've had the ability to do, we came right out of the gates in FY23, doing some downward pricing strategy as prime rate had fallen. And so repricing down clients that we could at the time to maintain the right rates in the market. So that created some positivity for us. Also, not necessarily moving as fastly along with the prime rate hike, passing that on to customers at a little bit slower pace than the actual prime rate hike. So it's actually given us some positivity from that side of things. Other income, the 16.5 million, I, again, don't need to allude to it, but we essentially are seeing that challenges, and it's a global piece, right, around the capital markets and the lack of opportunities out there that we're experiencing right now. Interestingly enough, if you exclude out capital markets and FMG, we're actually up, our other income's up 5.8 million and 9.4% year over year. So when you take out some of that volatility, there is some positivity, of course, that underlies our OI, so keep it up. On the NIE side, I mentioned most of that's coming from our employee costs, that $6.6 million savings. Again, what we have actually planned up for the rest of the year is some hiring back in. So we'll see that tighten up for year end. So that puts us at that 8.5 million sitting for income before loan loss provision year to date. Some interesting insights for you in FY23. We are seeing the highest growth in outstanding loans right now. This isn't committed, this is outstanding loans. We haven't seen this volume in over 4 years. So we're sitting just at over $1 billion growth year to date, probably landing closer to $2 billion by end of year. You'll see that most years we have the growth on the latter half. So if that indicates as well, same for this year, yeah, it's going to be a busy year. So then you're probably wondering, where is that coming from? Most of it's coming from the energy and ag sector. In the energy side of things, we're seeing actually a lot of it come from pipelines and the project finance space. So ag and energy, what does that lead to? I'll give you a little bit of information. So when it comes to the overall profitability for the organization, we take a look at a couple of things. You've got your underlying loan yield, which is what we charge out to the clients. And then you've got your deposit, which is the red there as well. I'm going to take a walk through this. So this is way back in March 2020. If you guys remember, we had a triple prime rate drop back then. And what we saw was on the loan side, our yields dropped pretty close and in tandem with the rate. Our deposit side, we also saw similar things happening. So a couple of things. When the loans happened back then, a lot of our annual renewals happened at the same time. So the timing was very perfect alongside with the prime rate movement. On the deposit side, I know Brian and his team moved along, like I mentioned earlier, in terms of doing some deposit repricing. So they did that throughout this whole time frame. They constantly optimize the portfolio, making sure that we are maximizing the benefit of our deposits and not overpaying for that. And then here's where the tricky has happened in this year. It looks like a little bit of a different story. So from the deposit side, yes, we've gone up, and we know that the prime rate's gone up, so we have to pay up for market. I mentioned that a little bit earlier. But on the loan side, what you can see is we are not keeping pace with prime, but there's a number of things underlying that. So like I mentioned, project finance and ag, they're actually our lower yield products that we sell out there. So from a mix standpoint, we're going to see a little bit lower of a yield as new ones come on the books. And if that's where the bulk of our growth is coming from, you can understand why some of our yields are behind overall. You would know that there's also improvement in BRRs out there, so we can't actually necessarily price up the clients when they're performing better. From the EMP side, the pricing grids have also been dropping, and I think that they're at their low at this point in time, so potentially moving up in the future. But you play all that into our financials, and what you end up getting is a lower overall yield. So what does that mean? Well, as we move forward into this next bit of the fiscal year, we're actually expecting deposit pricing to ramp up. We're going to be capturing close to $1 billion in the latter half of this year, and we're going to pay for it. So that red line at the bottom is actually going to spike up even closer towards that blue line. And so what does that mean out there on the loan side? You know, there are limitations, of course, in terms of what we can price, but just being mindful of it, that we see that compression on our spreads, both from the loans and the deposit side, it will play into our financial performance for the remainder of the year. So just be mindful of whatever you can do from your side. But just as we think through to the remainder of this fiscal year, we are sitting to be, let's just say, a titch over plan is probably as best as I can explain it. It could kind of take any sort of thing to mark us up and down from the actual 100%. So that's where we're sitting kind of at this point in time. Like I mentioned, we've got further spread compression expected on the deposit side, and especially if we're going to have future prime rate hikes. And again, capital markets, we did anticipate that into our projections, further challenges out. And then again, the FTE hires will close off some of those positive. It will hold the favorability year to date, but we're not going to carry that through to the rest of the year incrementally. So we do need to all do whatever we can to, what's that, Chris, power some possibility through to the end of the fiscal year. So with that, I'll hand it back.
Wow. A finance person is able to integrate marketing into her presentation. So thank you so much, Carrie.
Sorry, I know our partners are watching and they're just like, yeah, look at that branded deck.
There we go. One check mark for Carrie. I think for me, lots of people always ask the question, what are some of the things you've seen in ATV business? And I think the financial results speak to one of the things that were perhaps a bit surprising for me, and that's just how the different pieces of the puzzle fit so well together when we're dealing with an economy and a market that's not stable. That from a capital market standpoint, obviously volatility and is creating challenges, but at the same time, whether corporate banking, whether business banking on the loan side, having a record year from there. And I think that's the great thing about how the different pieces fit together. And that's why I've got tremendous confidence that we will finish on plan and that we continue down the road we're on, that no matter what market conditions that sit in front of us, that we'll have success. So a huge thanks to all the team members, because all over 700 team members are a big contributor to those results. So thank you very much for that. So lastly, before I open it up for what we think are questions coming through the live stream, but maybe multiple of different ways, people will be sending us questions today. I do want to talk about a restructuring that is going to take place at the end of the month. I've been told from Kristen, our PNC partner, to make sure everyone knows that everyone who's changing roles and doing all of that, or not changing roles, changing leaders, that you still have to go through your second quarter review with your current leader and make sure all of that takes place, as the changes probably don't show up in terms of our systems until sometimes the middle of November. I'll sort of continue with the suspense for a little bit longer, as I do want to sort of talk about two things before I get into the actual org structure. First is just a huge thanks to the adaptation team. For as much volatility as every one of us has endured over the last 12, 24, 36 months, the adaptation team, you could argue, and it wouldn't take much to argue this, they've probably experienced twice that. Started when the head of adaptation became ill and had to go on an extended leave, and then there was no temporary replacement. We just asked everyone to band together to find a way to make it work. And then that leader was only back for a short period of time before she left ATB. And then when I took over in July, I asked the adaptation team to show patience. I asked if they could be patient with me as I spent July and August and September really getting to understand the adaptation team, getting to understand ATB business before we made any changes. And they not only showed patience, they delivered on their mandate, continued to do absolutely amazing things for ATB business. So just a huge shout out to the entire adaptation team. Big mention to Steve, Alex, and Christy for their leadership throughout over the last 24 months, and a special mention to Chris Fleckenstein as well. So thank you so much to the adaptation team. The next announcement I want to get in, because I know when I go through it, people will be wondering. I don't hear this person's name, so I want to talk about this up front, and I want to acknowledge Christy Phelan. Christy, before ATB Business was created, was with CFS. She's been with ATB Business and CFS combined for just over 6 years, and getting a chance to talk to a number of team members who came to ATB Business from CFS. Christy will have spent some time perhaps interviewing them at one time, onboarding them, making sure that their journey was successful, sort of helping them with the tricks of the trade, and was absolutely critical in the success of CFS, the success of ATB Business. And Christy started support as a PNC partner for CFS, and she realized that for her own career and her career development, it meant that she had to go and spend some time in an AOE. And what worked out fantastic was there was an opportunity within CFS and ATB Business for her to spend some time learning the business outside of PNC. And she did an amazing job. And just like it was made sense for her to go in to ATB Business, it also made sense for Christy to go back to PNC. So Christy is taking a job with PNC, supporting our partners in TIE and XO, effective at the end of the month. So just a huge thank you, Christy, for all that you've done over the last 6 years for CFS team members, ATB Business team members, the adaptation team. And thank you selfishly. I know you accepted this job before I had the structure finalized and in place. And you could have said, I still want to leave now. But instead you stuck it out and agreed to stay with us until the end of October. So thank you very much for that, and all of the best. And all of us in ATB Business are a phone call away, and we will be still picking your brain and relying on all of your deep background and knowledge from there. So why restructure? Why now? A lot of you on the call would have heard Curtis say that, structure enables strategy. And right now we're just finishing the first few innings of the 10-year strategy, the first 3 innings, and we're approaching the middle innings on the path to ATB 2030. So not that the strategy is changing, but where we are in that journey is changing. So it was critical for myself and the senior leadership team within business to take our time and understand what do these middle innings start to look like, and to make sure that we had the strategy right to support the next phase of the strategy. It was also critical to make sure that we had the right structure that recognized the uniqueness of ATB Business, that ATB Business is different than other SSUs and AOEs, and that we not only have to recognize that uniqueness, but we have to build on the success, not only over the last 3 years, but the success of business and agriculture, the success of Elta Corp, and the success of CFS, or Corporate Financial Services. So those were some of the reasons why it made sense. We need to make sure that as we enter these middle innings, that we have an attention and a focus on operational excellence, that we need to make sure we have speed of project delivery. We have some critical initiatives coming up, whether ECRM, that will play a big factor in next year, whether sector and segmentation, the enhancement and the maturity of data, and probably the biggest one all across. And you could see through Carrie's presentation just how important this is for our business in terms of end-to-end lending. So we need that focus on operational efficiency and speed from a project standpoint moving forward. We need to make significant progress on our desire to differentiate based on the experience we're providing to our clients, with the advisor right at the center. The third pillar of ATB 2030 is exceptional or expert advice powered by AI, which is critical. And not just the third pillar of ATB 2030, but when you look at the advisory journey is also all about providing exceptional service through advisors. So it's critical that we have a focus on making sure we're able to differentiate based on the experience that we provide. And then finally, at ATB Business, which is no secret to anyone, we're relied upon across the enterprise to drive growth. That is our core function, is to drive growth. We're the biggest revenue driver all across the enterprise, and that needs to be true throughout the 10-year strategy. So those were the reasons why, to make sure we're aligned to where we are in the strategy from the middle innings, to make sure that we're going to bring to life this era of the advisor through client experience, and to make sure we're still able to drive growth from that standpoint. So everyone's like, okay, what are the changes? Talk about the changes. So there's really 4 main components that I'll talk about when I sort of frame up the changes. And the first is we're establishing a middle office. The middle office will be led by John Anderson, and it brings key operational teams together that will support and enable ATB Business on the path to 2030. Teams from underwriting and sales support third-party capital management, data and analytics, execution and optimization, change management, and business risk. It was absolutely really critical for us to create a middle office right now. When we look at those projects that we have going on, to make sure that we're able to look at those from an end-to-end standpoint across the middle office, where we're able to continue to elevate where we sit today, it was critical to bring that together, and no better person than John Anderson to lead the middle office. John brings extensive experience in his career working all across financial institutions, financial operations at scale, and has been key in the implementation of a number of large programs. So the creation of the middle office led by John Anderson is the first change that I wanted to highlight. The second is with relation to strategic markets, specifically Indigenous financial services with William and Patrick, and women in business led by Nikki From a maturity level, we really believe right now that both of those initiatives are at a stage where it's starting to be about execution horizontally. They're not fully sort of functional into the market, but where we believe is it starts to make sense now to be able to execute horizontally, not just within ATB business, but in some cases broader, and not just within business banking, but broader than business banking and within capital markets and within business solutions as well. Both of these initiatives are strategic markets in terms of Indigenous financial services and women in business. We'll report into Myron. I think everyone on this call knows Myron very well. Myron would be one of the purest sales leaders that I have ever had a chance to meet. He's really excited to be given both of these teams to work across all of ATB business, not just within business banking. So that's the second change that's going on. The third change is we will be standing up an advisor enablement function to really bring to life tools and resources that position our team members in business as their differentiator. It will play a critical role in that third pillar of ATB 2030 around expert advisory powered by AI, as well as that first objective of the advisory journey. Throughout the summer, I've heard from a number of frontline team members, whether in capital markets, whether in business banking, business solutions, it didn't matter from that standpoint. We rightfully so had to professionalize a number of things over the last few years with the coming together of ATB business. And on that journey to professionalize a number of things, frontline team members have been very clear that at times it's felt like we no longer trust team members, that we're not having this balance at perhaps the SBLT level, and this role is critical. For us to differentiate based on experience, this role will play a big factor, and we will look to post this role in the next few days to make sure it comes to life. Right now, you will see the learning team as well as from an events team report under this role, but becomes critical to how do we differentiate and what do we need to be true to bring this key strategy to life. So that's the third change. And finally, and lastly, the fourth change is Chris Fleckenstein, who leads the strategy team, will report to me directly. The challenges that ATB and ATB business face really over on the path to 2030 are fundamentally different than the ones we contemplated 5 years ago. We need to have a greater focus and engagement in strategic oversight. And Chris, for those of you who don't know Chris, he's led that team over the last number of years, reporting to Christy, and has done just an amazing job, everyone on that team. And it's important that we level that up to the SBLT so that we're focused, that we're clear in what we need to do and what we need to accomplish to bring 2030 to life, and to ensure that we've got this strong focus on growth and differentiating by the client experience. So those are the four main changes in terms of the creation of a middle office, the bringing together strategic markets under Myron, the advisor enablement role that will be posted, and then finally having Chris Fleckenstein join the SBLT from that standpoint. As much as oftentimes we talk about what's changing, I think it's also critically important to talk about what's staying the same. One of the things that's staying the same is capital markets is being led, will continue to be led by Darren. It remains a critically important component on our path to 2030. It's worth noting that I don't think in the last 12 months, no team has had to deal with external factors greater than what the capital markets team has had to deal with. That business, team members need to be in position. They need to be well prepared. They need to be have great relationships. And even despite having all of that, that doesn't guarantee your success. You need the right business environment. And we saw what that team did for ATB business when the right environment existed, and how they really propelled ATB business to levels that we didn't think were possible last year. And right now, I think it's incumbent on all of us as team members, as that environment is really challenging, to make sure we're doing everything possible to lift up our folks in capital markets. Because when things turn around, I know Darren and team will be in a tremendous position to drive success. So Darren and the leaders in capital markets will continue to do the great work that they're doing from that standpoint. And then finally, and lastly, Brian Ford will continue to lead business solutions. Carrie talked about some of the work Business Solutions had done. You saw our NII from a deposits standpoint. They're doing an amazing job from there, knowing exactly the market with this deep expertise to help us take advantage, to help us fund the bank. And we know there's some big challenges coming up in terms of funding that Carrie talked about, and Brian and team will make sure we're in tremendous position from that standpoint. In addition, we can't talk about Business Solutions without talking about the heroic work that they've done helping our clients navigate the new ATB business mobile app and online application, as whether that's some of the work with our relationship management, managed clients across business banking, across capital markets. That team has just done a tremendous job of rolling up their sleeves, knowing that they have hard conversations, knowing that clients are angry at the end of the phone, but still picking up that phone and making sure the clients feel not just welcomed, but they know that their voice is being heard. So a huge call out to Brian Ford and the entire Business Solutions team, as both capital markets and Business Solutions will be staying the same from that standpoint. So lastly, and now we'll let our sort of scrambling as we look to see where these different questions are going to be coming from. And if not, Melissa will just fire away. So please feel free to send in your questions. You know, for me, I had an opportunity to join ATB Business 1 quarter in terms of the beginning of July, and throughout the summer and into the fall, I've had a chance to speak with hundreds and hundreds of team members. And I can't reiterate enough how impressed I've been with all of the team members in terms of the focus on helping our clients navigate through challenging times, whether you go back to COVID, whether you go back to the price of oil sort of collapsing, whether you go to now in terms of the need for growth. And each client that I've had a chance to talk to as well over that time will say that team members in ATB Business have played a critical factor, and one of the main reasons of their success, and in a lot of cases why they're still in business, is for all of the work that team members have done across. So it's been really exciting. I'm really excited to dig in together with the senior SBLT, the Senior Business Leadership Team. I get that wrong all the time. We're getting together after the board approves the strategic plan to really start to get to work on our operating plan, which is at the end of November. So with that, Melissa, I will turn it over to you to see if there's questions on the structure, whether there's questions on financials, whether there's questions for Darren on the riders, or anything from that standpoint.
Hopefully people will be gentle for Darren. I know it's always a sensitive topic, him and his riders. Yes, so we do have a couple questions that have come in through our forum on the live stream post within Business News. So just to reiterate to everybody, I know we've had people kind of popping in and out and all of these tech trickies. You can submit through the forum on our live stream post. It does have the option of submitting anonymously, or I can share your question anonymously in there too, but please also reach out directly to myself through chat if that's easier, to Chris, to anybody here on the live stream. Carrie, Darren, fire us your question. We'll make sure that we get it shared here in that format. So I've got a couple that have come through, and just bear with me because this is maybe not the easiest format. Our first one here, let me see if I can see who it's from, is from Jordan Baldwin, and he's asking, since the last restructure, directors and associate directors have continually drifted apart in knowledge, process, and culture due to reporting lines and segmented objectives, despite being on the same team. Were you aware of this? And are you concerned that this additional restructure will further challenge the operational efficiency? So Chris, I'll toss that to you.
Yeah, I really appreciate the question, Jordan. So thank you so much for that. Yeah, it's absolutely something that we talked about. We talked a lot about that. We would have, through the conversations, acknowledged some of the challenges that you have raised over the last little while. And really from conversations from John, Darren, and Myron, understand just how important those two teams are, and how important in that connection to the front line from there. I think across this entire structure, what is critical for me, and not just as a senior leadership team in business, but across everyone, is that we continue to break silos or bust silos. If we look at it from an ATB, oftentimes we just look at that from outside. But I know John Anderson will ensure that not only are we addressing some of those concerns, but that the relationship remains close and that it remains critical in terms of development. So I appreciate calling that out, and I know that's something John's on top of.
All right, we've got another one from our team. They're asking about the associate directors too. So this comes from Shane O'Neill. He's asking, with the associate director team being moved again further from the sales team, what is the ultimate goal with the path to 2030? Is this transitioning from a direct portfolio management sales role to a centralized underwriting analyst pool role? What effect do you think this change might have on attraction and retention of talent, considering the challenges filling these positions to date? What effect might this have on career paths within sales?
Yeah, so I think a couple of things. One is the closeness to the client. I think we need to call out, I think one of the biggest changes that Curtis, even prior to him becoming CEO, would have talked about, that we had internal clients and external clients. We have one group of clients, and it's critically important that everyone sees their role and sees how their role contributes to the end client. So first, I want to acknowledge that. Second, I think in terms of career pathing, we need to continue to find different ways to create career opportunities and career paths. I think that's one of the things when you look at the entire performance enablement system. Part of the performance enablement system was about creating clear lines from a development standpoint in terms of what does that mean. So although the role is not sitting perhaps as close as it once did, if you go way back to the CFS days, I think from a career development standpoint, the mechanisms we've put in place to identify who's looking for career development, who's looking for that as a career path, provide us lots of opportunities, provide us also different creative opportunities that we can look at. And at the same token, John will talk about the need to continue to upskill and further add professionalization to those roles. So I think it's critical. And I think if anyone on that team today doesn't feel part, I think those are the conversations with your leader that you need to have. If that's your career and that's what you want, what do you need to be doing to get there, and be very intentional? Because the one thing I can tell you, when we look at the path to 2030, those roles in terms of director roles and frontline roles will be and maintain and continue to be critical for us to fill. Carrie talked about number of vacancies, and that's one of the examples of where we have vacancies. So we're looking to make sure we're able to develop talent internally for sure.
All right, so that kind of does it for our reorg questions. We did have one other question get submitted through the middle of the live stream here from Nathan. He was asking, a few months ago, we were talking about the possibility of ATB trying to move away from being classified as a Crown corporation. Would it be possible to get any updates on this? Is this still on the radar? If so, any traction? Or is this initiative taken a backseat to accommodate some of the changes we've been experiencing, both internally and externally?
Yeah, great question. Thanks, Nate. So any of the changes internally didn't take our focus off of the work to continue to go from there. I will say the leadership contest from a UCP standpoint, with the finance minister stepping down to try and become the leader of the UCP in terms of Travis Tays, that was one of our first conversations with the interim finance minister, was to make sure that work was continuing. As much as I'll say that work continued, it was probably put on hold, as everyone knew that that was sort of temporary. The great news, and I believe they're being sworn in today, is Travis Taves is once again the finance minister. So very much on the same page, and everything we've heard so far is very positive from that standpoint, that we will move away from being a Crown corporation to a commercial Crown corporation. So I want everyone to not sort of read into more that we're still going to be owned by the government still as a shareholder, but how we're classified is what we're working on to be a little bit different, which really just helps us get out of RABCA, which is this fancy government term from there. So that is still a big priority of ours. Curtis and Joan, from a board of directors standpoint, have made sure that stayed top of mind. And now with the finance minister coming back, I'm sure those conversations will accelerate.
Thanks for that update. And I just had a final question pop in regards to an org chart. So what we can do, just so team members who are a little bit more visual, we'll pop that in. There will be an article coming. I don't remember, Chris, if you had mentioned just to announce these changes to the rest of the organization. We can put a little link in there just so team members can get an idea of kind of who's going where and what some of those reporting lines might look like, though most of them are relatively the same, but we can pop that in just so everybody can get an idea of what this change will look like. So stay tuned for that in an article coming tomorrow morning. With that, nothing further there. Chris, we've got about 4 minutes left. I'll pass it over to you for some final remarks.
Sure. Thanks, Melissa. So I appreciate all the questions that everyone have. I appreciate that there's probably many more questions that people didn't want to ask. There's people that probably didn't get a chance to watch this live. So feel free to reach out to your leader. Feel free to reach out to myself. As I said earlier, when with regards to Chi, as a senior SBLT, we're going to work really hard to make sure that we create an environment, we earn your trust so that you feel comfortable asking us the difficult questions so we can provide transparency around that. So if you have any questions, any concerns, please feel real free to reach out to myself, because if we don't know what's on your mind, it's hard for us to tell you, how that relates or what does that mean. So please feel free to reach out. And once again, thank you so much for everything that you do. I know it's been a tricky year, and as the years and things start to go back to normal, we've had market volatility. So thank you very much for everything you do each and every day to power possibility. Check mark for myself, for our clients. So have a great day.